October 9th, 2026, 7:46 p.m., Newport Coast, California. The moment Serafina Vale saw her husband touch another woman like she belonged to him, she didn't scream, didn't drop the crystal glass in her hand, didn't press her palm against her heart like a broken woman in a tragic film. She simply stood beneath the golden lights of her own mansion, surrounded by music, flowers, expensive perfume, and 200 smiling guests, and understood that the marriage she had spent 6 years protecting had already died long before tonight. The strange thing was that her hand remained steady. The champagne in her glass did not ripple, her face did not crack, her lips did not tremble. To anyone watching from across the ballroom, she looked exactly as she was supposed to look: elegant, graceful, glowing, the perfect wife of one of California's most admired real estate billionaires, a woman carrying their first child with quiet dignity. But inside her, something colder than pain settled into place. It was not shock. Shock belongs to people who are surprised. Serafina was not surprised. She had been collecting the truth for months, one small piece at a time, until tonight finally gave her the last piece she needed. The Vale estate sat above the Pacific like a palace carved from white stone and glass, every terrace facing the ocean, every window designed to capture sunset, as if even the sky had been hired to perform for the family. Tonight, the house had been transformed for the celebration of the child everyone called the Vale heir. Cream roses climbed the staircase railings. White orchids floated in glass bowls. A string quartet played softly near the west wall, their music gentle enough to make betrayal feel almost polite. The theme was A New Dawn, chosen by Serafina herself because at the time, weeks ago, she still believed this child might bring light into a home that had grown colder with every passing month. The invitation cards had been embossed in gold. The dessert table had been flown in from a pastry chef in Paris. The nursery reveal video had been edited by a production team that usually worked with celebrities. Everything was beautiful, everything was expensive, everything was false. Serafina stood near the entrance in a pale champagne colored silk gown that draped gently over the curve of her 7-month pregnancy. Her hair was pinned low at the back of her neck, soft dark waves framing her face. Diamonds glittered at her ears, a gift from her husband, Dominic Vale, presented that morning with a kiss on her forehead and a sentence that now felt cruel in memory. "For the mother of my legacy," he had said. Not my love, not my heart, not my wife, my legacy. Even then, the word had felt wrong, but she had smiled because smiling was what she had learned to do best. People praised her glow. They told her she looked radiant. They touched her arm lightly and asked if the baby kicked often. She answered each question with warmth and calm because Serafina understood performance. She had been performing happiness for so long that sometimes even she forgot where the performance ended. Across the room, Dominic laughed. That laugh had once been her favorite sound. Now it felt like a door closing. Dominic Vale was the sort of man people lowered their voices around, not because he demanded it, but because power seemed to gather naturally wherever he stood. At 42, he was handsome in a severe cinematic way, with dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that could make investors feel chosen and rivals feel already defeated. He built luxury hotels, oceanfront towers, private resorts for people whose names never appeared on public documents. Magazines called him visionary. Competitors called him dangerous. His mother called him unstoppable. Serafina had once called him home. The woman beside him was named Celeste Arden. Serafina knew much more than her name. She knew Celeste was 31, recently promoted to Director of Brand Acquisitions at Vale Horizons, the hospitality branch Dominic had built from nothing and loved more fiercely than anything living. She knew Celeste had studied in Milan, spoke 3 languages, and had a habit of laughing. with her head tilted back, exposing her throat like an invitation. She knew Celeste's apartment was not paid for by her salary. She knew Dominic had visited that apartment on at least 6 occasions in the last 2 months. She knew because she had stopped asking questions and started finding answers. At first, it had been only a feeling. Dominic no longer lingered in doorways. He no longer came behind her in the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her waist the way he used to. When she spoke, his eyes drifted toward his phone. When she asked about his day, he gave her summaries, not stories. The intimacy of details disappeared first, then tenderness, then patience. He began touching her like obligation, kissing her like habit, sleeping beside her as if even rest had become a business arrangement. Serafina remembered the first lie clearly. It was a Wednesday in June. He told her he had a late dinner with investors from Singapore. She had believed him until she found the valet ticket in his jacket pocket the next morning. The restaurant was not downtown. It was a coastal place in Laguna, quiet and romantic, the kind of place where people went to disappear into candlelight. She said nothing. 2 weeks later, there was a perfume on his scarf that wasn't hers. A month after that, a message flashed across his phone while he was showering. It said, "Last night felt dangerous. I liked it." The contact name was saved as CA. People lie, her father used to say, but habits confess. Her father had been a trial attorney, calm, disciplined, and almost impossible to deceive. He had raised Serafina not to be loud, but to be exact. "Never fight with emotion when evidence will do the work for you," he told her when she was 16 and crying over a school betrayal. "If someone underestimates you, let them. The longer they underestimate you, the more careless they become." She had not understood then how much those words would one day save her. When Serafina married Dominic 6 years ago, she did so with a heart full of dangerous faith. They met at a charity auction in Santa Barbara, where she was helping curate a private art collection for a donor, and Dominic had arrived late, arrogant, and annoyingly charming. He bought a painting he admitted he didn't understand just because she described it beautifully. "You make me want to own things I don't deserve," he told her that night. She should have recognized the warning hidden inside the compliment. Instead, she laughed. Their courtship was fast, glamorous, overwhelming. Private dinners, flights to Paris, a proposal under fireworks on a yacht near Capri. Dominic made love feel like destiny. And Serafina, who had spent years building her own career as an art historian and gallery consultant, allowed herself to believe she could be both loved and respected by a man who wanted everything. In the beginning, he admired her mind. He asked her opinions. He brought her into rooms and introduced her as the woman who sees what others miss. But after marriage, admiration changed shape. He still liked her intelligence, but only when it reflected well on him. He liked her beauty, but more when others noticed it. He liked her calm because it made him look stable. Slowly, almost invisibly, she became part of his architecture, elegant, useful, decorative, positioned exactly where he wanted her. The pregnancy had been his idea. "We should stop waiting," he said one night after a bored dinner, standing at the bedroom window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "My father had me by 38. I'm already late." Serafina had looked at him carefully. "Late for what?" "For legacy." There was that word again. Still, when the pregnancy test turned positive, she cried alone in the bathroom, not from fear, but from a kind of fierce tenderness. Whatever Dominic was becoming, the child inside her was innocent. The baby was not a strategy, not a legacy, not a name on a trust. The baby was life, her future, her reason to stop being afraid. And because of the baby, everything changed legally too. Dominic's lawyers had written their prenuptial agreement like a fortress. If the marriage ended without children, Serafina would receive enough money to live beautifully, but not enough power to threaten anything. If there was a child, certain assets moved into a family protection trust. Dominic had agreed because he saw it as image management, a noble provision, a billionaire father securing his lineage. But Serafina's lawyer and closest friend, Mara Ellison, had found the opening hidden inside the arrogance. Mara was not a divorce lawyer in the dramatic television sense. She was colder than that, cleaner. A corporate litigator with eyes like polished stone and the patience of a surgeon. When Serafina first went to her office with trembling hands and a folder of receipts, messages, and photographs, Mara did not comfort her with empty outrage. She simply read everything, removed her glasses, and said, "Do you want peace or do you want leverage?" Serafina had stared at her. "I want my child safe." "Then we build leverage." For months they worked quietly. Serafina signed nothing without reading. She asked Dominic questions that sounded innocent but were not. She encouraged him to restructure certain assets for the baby. She praised his business instincts until he explained structures he should have kept guarded. She let him believe her curiosity was maternal, sentimental, harmless. He never imagined the woman sitting across from him at breakfast, asking about shareholder protections while spreading jam on toast, was learning the map of his empire. The central weapon became the coastal development company Dominic loved most, Vantage Blue, his first major success, the project that turned him from ambitious developer into legend. It owned hotel sites, marina leases, and resort rights across the Pacific coast. Dominic placed a minority stake into the family trust because it looked generous and symbolic. But Mara had added a clause tied to public marital misconduct during a family event. Dominic's lawyers glanced over it, assuming it was emotional language meant to comfort a pregnant wife. They missed the teeth. If Dominic publicly humiliated Serafina through provable infidelity at a family milestone, Serafina would gain sole voting proxy over the trust-held shares. Combined with shares already quietly purchased through an investment vehicle Serafina had funded under her maiden name, it would give her effective control over Vantage Blue. Dominic had built the house. Serafina had found the load-bearing wall, and tonight he had handed her the hammer. She watched Celeste move closer to him near the orchid display. Dominic leaned in and whispered something. Celeste smiled, then lifted her hand and brushed a speck of lint from his lapel. Her fingers stayed. Dominic didn't move away. Then, with the carelessness of a man too admired to fear consequences, he placed his palm low against her back. Not a friendly gesture, not professional, possessive, intimate. A touch that said, "Mine." Serafina felt the baby kick, once, hard. Her hand moved to her belly. "I know," she whispered. Mara appeared beside her, dressed in black, holding a cream-colored folder that matched the decor so perfectly no one would think twice about it. "Are you sure?" Mara asked quietly. Serafina kept her eyes on Dominic. "I was sure when he lied. I became certain when he stopped caring whether I believed him." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then we do it now." Serafina nodded. She did not storm across the ballroom. She did not rush, did not cry, did not let fury make her clumsy. She walked as if crossing a stage she had rehearsed on for years. Guests turned as she passed. Some smiled, some stepped aside. A few noticed Mara behind her and sensed something serious enough to lower their voices. Dominic saw her when she was only a few steps away. His smile appeared immediately, automatic, public. "My love," he said, opening his arm as if to draw her close. Serafina stopped before he could touch her. "Dominic," she said softly. Something in her tone changed his expression. Celeste looked between them, her smile still present, but beginning to strain. Serafina turned slightly toward the room. "Forgive me, everyone. Before we continue with the gifts, Dominic and I have one final family document to complete. It should only take a moment." A ripple of polite amusement moved through the guests. Wealthy people loved paperwork when it was dressed up as legacy. Dominic chuckled, but his eyes were cautious. Now, now, Serafina said. Mara placed the folder on a nearby table. A pen rested on top of the first page. Dominic glanced down and recognized the logo of Mara's firm. What is this? The final trust acknowledgement, Serafina replied. For the baby. At the word baby, his public face recovered. He smiled broadly and looked around the room. My wife never stops thinking ahead. That's why she's the heart of this family. The old Serafina might have softened at that sentence. Tonight it passed through her like smoke. Yes, she said, I have been thinking ahead. She picked up the pen and signed her name. Serafina Vale. No hesitation, no tremor. Then she lifted her eyes and looked directly at Celeste. I saw you, she said. The room changed. It was immediate. A silence so sharp it seemed to cut the music in half. Dominic's smile froze. Serafina, I saw you touch her, she continued, her voice calm enough to be terrifying. Here, tonight, at the celebration for our unborn child. Celeste's face drained of color. Dominic stepped closer. You're emotional. This is not the time. Serafina looked at him with something almost like pity. You should have thought of that before choosing this room as your stage. A faint gasp moved through the crowd. Dominic lowered his voice. Don't do this. I didn't, she said. You did. Mara opened the document to a specific page and turned it toward him. Clause 12, Serafina said. Public breach of marital covenant during a family milestone event. Your lawyers approved it. Your signature is already on the master agreement. My signature tonight activates the trust position. Dominic stared at the page. For the first time since she had known him, Serafina watched true fear enter his eyes. What did you do? He whispered. I protected our child. No, he said, scanning the document faster now. No, this doesn't mean... It means I now hold voting proxy over the trust stake in Vantage Blue, Serafina said. And with the shares purchased through my private investment vehicle, I control the board. The words landed like stones. Dominic looked up slowly. Around them, people were no longer pretending not to listen. You can't do that, he said. I already did. Celeste took a step back, suddenly understanding that she was standing too close to a collapsing building. Dominic's face hardened. You planned this. Serafina's expression did not change. I survived this. The difference was not lost on anyone. He reached for the papers, but Mara placed one hand over the folder. Copies are filed, she said. Touching that one won't save you. Dominic's fury flared, hot and ugly. You think this makes you powerful? No, Serafina said. Power is what allowed you to believe you could humiliate me in my own home and still expect me to smile. This is not power. This is consequence. The room remained frozen. Dominic looked toward Celeste, and in that glance, Serafina saw the truth of him again. He was already searching for someone else to blame. You, he snapped at Celeste. Leave. Celeste flinched. Dominic? Leave. Tears filled her eyes, but whether they came from heartbreak or humiliation, Serafina didn't care. Celeste rushed toward the side exit, her silver dress flashing under chandelier light like a blade disappearing into shadow. Dominic turned back. You destroyed me in front of everyone. Serafina leaned closer, her voice low but clear. No, I let everyone see what you built. Then she addressed the guests. I apologize for the interruption. The staff will continue service. Please enjoy the evening if you can. I will not be staying. She turned and walked away. Every step felt longer than the last. Whispers rose around her like wind. Some shocked, some admiring, some cruel, none mattered. Near the staircase, Dominic's mother, Vivian Vale, stepped into her path. Vivian was draped in pearls and old money, her face pale with rage. You have humiliated my son, Vivian said. Serafina looked at her. Your son humiliated himself. I simply stopped covering it. Vivian's lips parted, but no words came. Serafina continued up the stairs. In the bedroom, her suitcase was already packed, not with dramatic haste, but with quiet order. Comfortable clothes, legal copies, medical files, the baby's first blanket, a framed photograph of her father. Mara entered behind her and closed the door. You were flawless, Mara said. Serafina sat on the edge of the bed for the first time all night and released a breath she felt she had been holding for months. I don't feel flawless. What do you feel? Serafina placed both hands over her belly. Tired. That was when tears finally came. Not loud, not wild, just slow, silent tears sliding down her face as the body caught up with what the mind had already done. Mara sat beside her without speaking. I wanted him to be better, Serafina whispered. I know. I wanted my son to have a father I could respect. Mara's voice softened. He still may have a father someday, but not because you protected Dominic from consequences, because Dominic earns the right. Serafina wiped her face carefully. I don't think he knows how. Then that's his tragedy. Downstairs, the party continued to collapse. Upstairs, Serafina stood, put on her coat, and took one last look at the bedroom that had once felt like the center of her married life. The silk wallpaper, the ocean view, the enormous bed where she had slept beside a man who was already elsewhere. It all looked expensive and empty. At the service entrance, a car waited under the night sky. Serafina stepped inside, with Mara beside her. As the mansion disappeared behind them, the baby kicked again. This time, Serafina smiled through tears. We're free, she whispered. The following Monday, the business world learned that Serafina Vale was not merely a betrayed wife, she was a strategist. At 9:12 a.m., Vantage Blue announced a restructuring of its board following a lawful proxy transfer from the Vale Family Protection Trust. By noon, Dominic Vale had been removed as executive chair. By 3 o'clock, investors were calling Serafina's team, not his. By the end of the week, major financial outlets were discussing not the scandal itself, but the breathtaking precision of Serafina's move. Dominic tried to fight. Of course he did. He called attorneys, he threatened lawsuits, he accused her of manipulation. But every document was clean, every signature valid, every clause approved by his own counsel. He had built his empire on contracts and control. Now a contract had controlled him. His board abandoned him with the same cold efficiency he had once admired in business. Friends stopped inviting him. Rivals smiled too openly. The press used words like downfall, arrogance, and self-inflicted collapse. His public image, once polished like black marble, cracked under the weight of one unforgettable night. Serafina did not celebrate. That surprised people. She did not give interviews. She did not leak cruel details. She did not post statements dressed as empowerment. She focused on work, health, and silence. Silence, she had learned, could be sharper than revenge. 3 months later, on a rainy January morning, her son was born. She named him Luca Monroe, not Vale, Monroe, her name, her mother's name, a name that carried no empire, no scandal, no man's vanity, just history, strength, beginning. When the nurse placed Luca against her chest, Serafina wept openly for the first time without shame. He was small and warm and furious at the world, his tiny fists clenched, his cry strong enough to fill the hospital room. Hello, my love, she whispered. You don't have to inherit anyone's mistakes. Mara stood near the window, wiping her eyes and pretending she wasn't. For the first 6 months of Luca's life, Serafina built a new rhythm. Mornings were slow and soft. Bottles, lullabies, tiny socks disappearing into impossible places. Afternoons were business calls from a sunlit office in Laguna Beach, where she had moved into a smaller home overlooking the water. Not small by ordinary standards, but human, warm, filled with art she chose because it made her feel something, not because it impressed guests. Vantage Blue changed under her leadership. She sold projects that harmed coastal communities. She invested in sustainable resorts. She promoted women Dominic had overlooked. She turned the company from a monument to one man's ego into something steadier, more ethical, more alive. People called it reinvention. Serafina called it repair. Dominic saw Luca only through supervised legal arrangements. The first visit took place in a neutral family center with glass walls, soft toys, and a counselor present. Dominic arrived thinner, quieter, wearing a suit that looked too formal for a room full of stuffed animals. When he saw Luca, something broke across his face. "He looks like you," he said. Serafina adjusted Luca's blanket. "He looks like himself," Dominic nodded, ashamed. For an hour, he held the baby awkwardly, as if afraid that love might reject him too. Serafina watched from across the room, not with hatred, but with caution. Hatred required too much energy. She had better uses for hers now. After the visit, Dominic followed her into the hallway. "Serafina." She stopped. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were quiet. No performance, no audience, no strategic advantage. She looked at him carefully. "For what?" He swallowed. "For humiliating you, for betraying you, for making you feel alone when you were carrying our child, for thinking being powerful meant I could do whatever I wanted and still be loved." It was the first honest thing he had said in a very long time. Serafina felt the old ache stir, but it no longer controlled her. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. His eyes lifted with fragile hope. "But apology is not restoration," she continued. "It is only the beginning of accountability." The hope dimmed, but he nodded. "I know. I hope you become a better father than you were a husband." "So do I," he whispered. She walked away with Luca in her arms. 1 year after the night of the baby shower, Serafina returned to a ballroom. Not the one in the Vale mansion. That house had been sold after the divorce finalized. She never asked who bought it. This ballroom was in Santa Barbara, overlooking the ocean. The event was a fundraiser for women rebuilding their lives after financial and emotional abuse. Serafina had agreed to speak, though she almost canceled 3 times. It wasn't fear of public speaking. It was the weight of being seen for the truth, not the image. When she walked onto the stage, the applause surprised her. She stood at the podium in a simple white dress, no diamonds, no armor, her hair loose around her shoulders. For a moment, she looked out at the faces before her. Women in gowns, women in business suits, women with tired eyes, women with hopeful ones. And she thought of the version of herself standing in that other ballroom, holding a champagne glass, steady, while her heart quietly closed. "I used to think strength meant endurance," she began. "I thought if I could remain calm enough, graceful enough, forgiving enough, then love would eventually remember me. I thought silence was dignity. Sometimes it is, but sometimes silence is just fear dressed beautifully." The room became very still. "I learned that betrayal does not always arrive as one dramatic wound. Sometimes it arrives as a series of small dismissals, a forgotten promise, a cold tone, a lie you feel before you prove, a touch given to someone else in a room where you were supposed to be honored." Her voice trembled once, but she steadied it. "I also learned that revenge is not always about destroying someone. Sometimes what looks like revenge is simply a woman removing her hands from a structure she was never meant to hold alone. If his world collapses when you stop supporting it, then perhaps it was never strong. Perhaps you were the foundation." A few women in the audience wiped their eyes. Serafina continued, "I did not win because he lost. I won because I stopped abandoning myself. I won because my son will grow up knowing that love without respect is not love. I won because I learned that the quietest woman in the room may not be weak. She may simply be waiting until the truth is ready." When she finished, the applause rose slowly at first, then fully, warmly. like a wave. Backstage, Mara hugged her. You did it. Serafina smiled. No, I'm doing it. That night, after the event, she returned home to find Luca asleep in his crib, one tiny hand curled near his cheek. The ocean outside whispered against the shore. The house smelled faintly of lavender and baby soap. She stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her son breathe. She thought about Dominic, about Celeste, about the mansion, the folder, the silence after her words. She thought about all the versions of herself she had been: the hopeful bride, the patient wife, the suspicious woman, the strategist, the mother, the survivor. And finally, she thought about the future, not as something someone would build for her, but as something already in her hands. Lucas stirred softly, opening his eyes just enough to see her. Mama, he mumbled sleepily, though it was barely a word. Serafina's heart filled so suddenly she had to grip the doorframe. I'm here, she whispered. And she was, fully, finally. The woman who once stood beneath chandeliers pretending not to break was gone. In her place stood someone quieter, wiser, and infinitely stronger. Serafina Monroe had not simply escaped betrayal, she had transformed it. She had taken the ruins of a life built around someone else's ego and turned them into the foundation of her own peace. Outside, the ocean kept moving, steady and endless under the moonlight. Inside, her son slept safely, and Serafina understood, with a calm deeper than victory, that the greatest revenge was not the company, not the headlines, not the fall of Dominic Vale. The greatest revenge was this: a peaceful home, a child untouched by his father's arrogance, a life that no longer required pretending, and a woman who would never again confuse being chosen with being owned.